Hi, and welcome back, everyone, to another newsletter of Creating Sanctuaries of Learning. I recently had the opportunity to attend the Peter Conference in Brisbane, and a particular highlight was meeting Simon and Daniel from Holy Cross Primary School, Wooloowin, where I learned about their highly effective school-wide strategy for driving writing growth. And their NAPLAN results really do show that growth. Their success story, which centers on the intentional use of quality mentor text, was truly inspiring, which is why I've asked them to come and share their story with you today. So, firstly, I'd like to introduce Simon Mahaffey. Give us a wave, Simon. Simon is an educator who has worked in Catholic primary schools across Brisbane, as well as in the Brisbane Catholic Education Office over the past 22 years. He has previously held the roles of Head of Campus Primary, AP, Education Officer, Classroom Teacher, and currently holds the role of Principal. Simon holds a Bachelor of Education Primary, a Master of Religious Education, and a Master in Educational Leadership. He has also studied at the Catholic University of Leuven, Belgium. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Wow.
Um, Simon has a strong belief in every student achieving their full potential, and that our responsibility as educators is to reflect upon our pedagogical practices so that our teaching is highly impactful and effective. And I did love about Simon how when I asked him, I was interviewing all the presenters, as many as I could at the conference, and I asked Simon, what's your one practical tip for schools who want to improve writing? And the first thing he said was, get to know your students. And that's
Yeah.
when I thought, light bulb, he's the one that I need to interview. So I'm so happy that Simon, that you were able to make this time along with you, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
Now, Daniel Owen, give us a wave, is the learning leader at Holy Cross Wooloowin. With a decade of classroom teaching and 4 years leading learning across school communities, he brings both experience and insight to his role. Daniel is passionate about empowering teachers to grow through mentoring and collaboration. He's committed to developing as a leader in both practical and theoretical ways, and currently over halfway through his master's in educational leadership at ACU. How
Yep.
exciting!
Yes, very exciting. Lots of work, but very exciting.
You guys obviously love learning.
Yeah.
All right,
That's
let's
what we're here for. That's why
yeah,
we're teachers. That's the
exactly
business.
right. So let's jump in. I want to start with what was the biggest literacy challenge that sparked this whole mentor text initiative?
Would you like to start first? I can start. Well, and Simon and I started at Holy Cross in 2023. At that point, we were what we call a priority school, where our school improvement team at Brisbane Catholic Education was working closely with our school to look at things like our results or our similar schools' data to try and align that with where we should be. Um, Somewhere where we thought we could really target was our writing because our initial observations were that our students were quite capable writers, but there was just so much more room for improvement. And we just needed that consistency of practice across our staff so that they would drip down into our classrooms and improve our students' writing. So I guess we saw an opportunity for growth and also a bit of low-hanging fruit too.
Hmm.
And I think, like I said before, it comes back to knowing your learners. So we could see, like Dan was saying, that there was that opportunity for growth. Our data, while okay, we wanted consistent practice from year level to year level. So children, as they go through our school, they're not having to relearn all the practices, which enables them to pick the next year level up much faster and then run with it. And so we could just see that as a natural point. And the school had already done some work previously around some spelling and grammar. So how do we best apply that? Well, through our writing. So it was like the next logical step.
Awesome. What professional learning was critical for your staff's success with mentor texts, and what other core shared understandings they gained?
So there was quite a bit of professional learning, as you could imagine, in that year. Mentor text being only one of the signature practices that we developed that year in writing, but it was probably our most impactful, would you say, Dan?
100%. It was the
Yeah.
most impactful by far. We started the year with professional learning about creating a writing culture amongst staff, but also in our classroom. So that was kind of our term one theme. And then when we moved into term two, that's when we were like, well, let's introduce the pedagogical practice that'll be most impactful. And that was mentor text. So we were fortunate enough to have Rachel Hill come in, and she was an EO for Brisbane Catholic Education at the time.
Now with Peter.
But she was able to facilitate, I guess, that first introduction to mentor text in a Twilight staff meeting. And I think that was what was real powerful for our staff, was it was hands-on. They could actually look at examples of mentor texts, look at current texts that have been used by other schools in our system. And while the PD was going on, you could see that the teachers were having ideas about how they could implement that in their classroom. So it was theoretical, but it was also practical.
And I think that's the key. You need practical things that teachers can literally walk out of that PD session and the next day use it in their classroom without having to spend hours or days trying to set something up. I think I can't claim the credit for the words, but I remember a friend of mine years ago saying to me, if you can't walk out and use it within 3 days, you're never going to use it. So with mentor text, I think because it was so practical, the teachers could just pick it up and run with it.
I'm hearing this, you had quality professional learning around this, obviously.
Yes, yeah. And I think, that's also critical because, as I said, we used our consultants. We're lucky we're part of a system of schools with Brisbane Catholic Ed. So we leverage off that. So having somebody like Rachel come and work with our staff who is known, who is trusted and respected, then teachers are likely to go, okay, yeah, we trust in this, we trust this person, and we trust in this process.
What about for schools? A lot of my schools are public schools who I have a lot of love for, who are extremely resourceful and do the best with what they have. Do you have any, I know this wasn't on the script, but
That's okay.
where would you say they start if they want to learn about what mentor texts even are?
I think there's a lot of good resources out there. And so I know that obviously Peter has some really good ones. And while I haven't reviewed all of the professional learning on there, what I have seen with Peter is they package it up into really good bite-sized professional learning pieces. So sometimes if you can't get access to a person, as I said, we were lucky. We have a great system. We have great personnel in our system. But there is certainly things out there. I also know through places like Aero have some really good things as well. We've used a lot of their stuff. And they have really good video packages that go with it because then you can see it. I think teachers are just like our students. They need to see things in order to understand it. We can talk at them and explain something, but when they see it, when they watch a video of it, when they watch another teacher demonstrating it, I think the professional learning becomes a lot richer and a lot more powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with quality professional learning being actually practical for teachers.
Yeah, it needs to be practical.
Now, Stephanie, I'm just mindful the sun is moving. I think I can't tell whether it's coming through as a band on your screen with us. We can't actually see our own faces at the moment.
I can see you fine.
Is it coming through as a band?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. It's coming through somewhere and I can't work out where it is. If it does start to become blurry or
I'll pause it and let you know.
Yes, let us know.
Daniel, I'd love to come back to your idea around creating a writing culture, which I love. What did that look like?
Well, one of the first steps was for our staff to voice how they see writing in their classroom. So what's the current space or climate we're in right now? When you do a writing lesson, what does it look like? So we had teachers talk about the physical act of writing. We had teachers talk about the attitudes of students around their writing. We've got some really great students that write. We've got some students that really struggle. So just to get that teacher voice at first and see where everyone's at, and then I guess kind of feeding that into the classroom of going, well, let's give the students a voice as well and ask them, what kind of things do they like to write about? What is it about writing that they enjoy or find difficult? And then providing students with lots of opportunities to write. So not just that real formulaic kind of writing, like we're doing narrative today, we're doing persuasive tomorrow, but looking at lots of different stimuli. So anything from images or topics in the media or the news, or even a really strong one is in response to any literature. So any literature that you're looking at in class with your students, kind of flipping that and going, well, what's a way that we could respond to some of the characters or some of the settings or some of the ideas in this text? And then just kind of looking at or having those every time opportunities for writing. It actually ended up becoming one of our signature practices. We ended up calling them short writes or quick writes.
Mm.
which can be, from 10, 20 to 30-minute writing that's, I guess it's planned, but it's more of an informal collection of evidence, but also just for students to write for pleasure. And we found that once students had a different attitude and the teachers had a different attitude around writing, we were able to do things like have displays of the students writing, really celebrate any pieces of writing that they'd done. And I think that was really powerful for the teachers and the students and even the parents to walk into a classroom and go, oh, there's authors in here.
Mm.
And, there's writing in here, like kids in here are writing and it's evident. It's not just filed away in their English book or, writing journal never to be seen. It's actually up and celebrated. And, when the leadership team could go to any of the classrooms, we could look at someone's writing and say, oh, Audrey, I see that you've been writing about this today. Or Michael, I can see that you've been quite interested in this. And it just is a really good point for everyone to celebrate that together.
And I think part of it as well was also knowing that sometimes as educators, because we are so conscientious, all educators are, we were looking at also not always having to write a whole piece. Like it didn't have to be a narrative from start to finish. It might be that we're just looking at the introduction, how do we hook people in? Or it might be we've read something and then we're just going to write the conclusion for it. So it didn't always have to be a whole text being created every time we write, because sometimes that's a bit overwhelming for children, especially if we're wanting to focus on upskilling in a particular area, then you could really just hone in on that little part. But like what Dan was saying before, but also like the presenters at the recent conference, making sure that we're also giving some opportunity for writing for joy. We don't want writing to be a chore, that the only time they're writing is for an assessment or something like that. But getting that opportunity just to write for pleasure.
I love that you're bringing up just the joy of writing and not just writing a whole text for NAPLAN prep. You didn't even mention that, which I love. I love the symmetry I'm hearing between what you're getting teachers and the students to experience, which I think is contributing to your success. So thank you for sharing that. You've kind of already answered this, but how did you get high-level buy-in from all of your teachers without stifling their creativity and autonomy?
I think there's a few different things, and we'll probably tag team on this one, I think. But like as Dan mentioned before, I think having that quality professional learning is key, because that will be your first hook in, because that's that chance for people to imagine doing something different. It's that sparks the imagination. Oh, there's a different way that I could possibly do this. I think also by seeing the impact of what's happening. So when the teachers can see the impact of the mentor text for the student writing, that gives that courage to keep going because they can see that it's making a difference. So I think they're two big things that I noticed. But Dan, what would you add?
I would say that to kind of not stifle their creativity, writing's quite a creative thing. Obviously, well, it can be very creative. So we really encouraged our teachers to select mentor texts that they felt comfortable with. We didn't say, we're doing mentor texts, here they are, now take them to your classroom and teach writing. We said, well, your learners the best. You yourself are an author and a writer. So what kind of text do you want to introduce to your students? Within the lens of the curriculum, obviously, but how can you put your spin on these things and how can you unpack that with your students? So, and I think, when we walked through every classroom, there was evidence of mentor texts, but they were done quite differently. There was some similarities, but you could kind of see that teachers touch on it, maybe a more creative touch or maybe a more, structured approach, but you could really see the teacher's personality and style come out in the way that they ran that.
And I think it was good for the kids to see teachers as authors, as teachers, as co-creators, because often they would do it as either a joint construction or live, so not just here's a pre-prepared thing. So the kids actually got to see, the teachers as authors, but also thinking through the process of how I write. So I think that also got buy-in because that generates enthusiasm, not only for the kids, but also for the teacher.
I love the focus. It just sounds like you have this real community of writers. And Daniel, you said you yourself are an author writer. And I feel like if I was a teacher at your school and being told that I have, I'm valued and I have strengths in writing already, I would feel supported in making these changes for my kids. So I can just hear it in your language.
That's
So
great.
great. Simon, from a principal's perspective, because I do have a lot of principal friends who view these videos, what
Yep.
what key cultural shift beyond just the literacy focus did you need to drive to ensure the sustainability of the
Yeah.
high writing standards across the whole school?
And I think that was a big one for us because schools are such busy places. We have so much going on. It is very easy to pivot in another direction. I think, a fellow presenter colleague mentioned at the Peter conference, it's a little bit, you can be a little bit like Dory sometimes, where you can just, oh, I'm onto this, oh, I'm onto this, oh, I'm onto this. Whereas we really need to have that laser-like focus. So I think to help us do that, we had to build some really good structures that laid the foundation for the work that we were doing. I think some of those things were, firstly, was around building trust, especially for us that year, because both Daniel and I were new to the school that year. So we didn't know our teachers and our school officers or our students. We were brand new. So we had to build trust. And I think one of the ways we did that was we put ourselves as learners alongside our teachers. We were not coming in saying we are the experts. We are learning alongside you as we're doing this process. We too, as a staff, are a community of learners, just like our students. I think the other thing was respecting our teachers as professionals. We have fabulous teachers at Holy Cross who do great work day in and day out. We want them to feel recognized for that. And we also want to leverage off their skill and off their talent. We are not coming in assuming that our teachers don't have a base quality pedagogy. It's about how we're going from good to great. So I think those were two foundational things. I think also as a leader, we as a leadership team wanted to make sure that we were having high expectations for our students. So it's really encouraging that notion of what is the potential of our students? Let's not undersell our students. We have diverse learners in our school, like every school does, and we have quite a bit of diversity when it comes to our learners, but really looking at what is their full and strong capability that we can bridge off, leverage off, to get them to be flourishing learners. So I think that was really key, and probably some of the other things, with those foundational things, were making sure we were really clear with the why. This is why we're doing what we're doing. This is the impact we want to see, so that the teachers have that absolute clarity. I think it's a Brene Brown comment that we use all the time, which Rachel used for us when she was doing our PD. Clarity is kindness. When our teachers have clarity, then they can make it clear for our students as well. So I think there's some of the key things. Probably the final thing that I mentioned there is probably just a little bit of that ongoing cycle. We were very deliberate to have relevant, targeted professional learning about whatever the concept was. So, for example, mentor texts. Followed very quickly within the next week or so by classroom planning with Daniel to embed that into their English planning, followed very quickly by teachers implementing that in their classrooms, and then shortly after that, conducting learning walks and talks so that we could actually see that in action and provide feedback to our staff about how they were going with that, and also getting feedback from the students about what was their experience of that. And then that continual cycle, we just continued on throughout the whole year, and that kept the momentum going, and also made sure that we were always checking for impact. Is what we're doing having impact on our learners? Because if it's not having impact on our learners, why would we continue it?
Oh, you're speaking right to my heart. Yes. And I remember when at the conference you put up your goal. I took a photo of it. Your vision was through an understanding of writing, the composing process in the Australian curriculum, English, collaboratively moderating student writing to inform judgments and plan a teaching response. For schools who want to develop a vision, Simon, how did you develop that goal or that vision?
So that was done in collaboration, so with our leadership team, but also, as Daniel was saying, with our head office team at the time who was supporting us. So they came out, because Dan and I were both new, as I said before, we had a joint meeting in that January. So literally 2 weeks before school started.
2 weeks before school started.
This wasn't something that was plan 6 months in advance. We both came in new 2 weeks before the kids were there, and we're looking at this based on looking at our data. We also knew that we wanted to roll out version 9 of the Australian curriculum because, we had to begin that transition process. So it was a perfect way. So I think, when you're setting that vision, you've got to be informed by your context. What's your data saying? What are your people saying? What are you noticing in your school? Because there's no point setting a vision for something that you're already doing well. That's a waste of time. So you need to look for where is the gap or where is the need and center your vision around that. And going back to what you were saying before, Stephanie, around how did we keep that focus and how did we build that culture from a leadership perspective? Probably the other big thing, and I remember saying it at the conference is, and one thing that I struggle with, I will admit, is keeping that narrow and tight focus. It is so tempting in schools to go off in different tangents all the time, but going slow to do it deeply, to do it well, that was probably critical to the success that we faced. If we just kept rushing through things like, with mentor text, our first time we did learning walks and talks, we realized like, okay, we missed the mark with a couple of classes here. They haven't quite got it. We need to go back. If we had just kept powering through, we wouldn't have been able to readdress that. We actually decided to stop, go back, do a follow-up PD, do some more exemplars, which delayed our rollout of the rest of our improvement agenda. But that's what had to happen, because if it didn't hit the mark, then we needed to know that and we needed to fix that.
I really like your point about constantly checking for impact.
Yeah.
It's like we don't just check at the final assessment. We need to, take the temperature, check for understanding throughout the journey so that we can make tweaks.
And we were deliberate as well. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. We were deliberate as well in getting checks from third parties. So, because Dan and I and our leadership team, we're in our school every day, we're seeing what's going on in classrooms every day. We pretty much walk into classrooms every single day when we're at school. Like every day we walk through our classroom. So we're seeing things there all the time. What we wanted to do is we wanted to bring in other people who weren't in our school all the time and say, go into our classroom. This is what we're looking for with mentor text. Here is our little checklist of what we should see, from our signature practice document. Let us know what you're seeing. We want your feedback. So people like Rachel would come out, other senior leaders in our system would come out, and Dan and I would sort of hang back and not say anything, and then sort of wait anxiously, like parents, and wait for the other school leaders to sort of come back and report back about what they saw. And it was always, great excitement when they were seeing the same things that we were seeing.
We're very proud parents.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. There's a lot to be proud of here at Holy Cross, because our staff are fabulous. And I can see that sun is hitting the camera.
Now the sun. I'll pause for a second.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Simon. Daniel, as the primary learning leader or instructional leader, or we call them APC&Is here in New South Wales, what was your role in directly supporting teachers to implement mentor text effectively in their classrooms?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to, facilitate some of the professional learning throughout the year as well. Initially, obviously, it was Rachel, but then as I started to get a hang of it myself, I was able to facilitate a lot of that, which I think was quite powerful. The other great thing, and I guess some currency for me, is that I actually I have a teaching load as well. So I teach 2 days of the week in the upper primary. We've got a year 5-6 class. So I'm actually implementing a lot of these strategies that our teaching staff are as well. So I actually get to try these things in my class and go, oh, that works, that doesn't work, before I just go and tell everyone, like, this is what we're doing. So I'm able to share my experience while my peers are experiencing the same thing, which I think's been really powerful. Also at the planning table. So I spoke about in the conference that after our professional learning, I sit down with the teachers and we plan our cycles of English, and we just look for those opportunities to implement mentor texts. And I can be, I guess, that second teacher to say, oh, we could do this, or how about we try this, or, this part of the sequence of learning would be a great time to revisit the mentor text and look at this particular part of the success criteria. So at the planning table as well. And I also found some of our staff, they needed a bit of assistance or they needed to see something firsthand. So on the days that I'm released in the office, I'd be able to come into some classes and model how to actually deconstruct and unpack the mentor text. That was probably one of the aspects that teachers wanted to see or be a part of, kind of that co-teaching model around that. But also that teacher as writer, because it's not always the most natural thing to, share and have that meta language in front of students around what you're thinking as an author. Because when you're writing, you're thinking and you're putting pen to paper, but to actually stop and go, oh, I might write this word, or no, I'm going to change it. I'm thinking of a better word. Can someone help me? Those sorts of things. That's actually quite a shift in mindset and in practice, because that's not a natural thing for us to do. So great to get into classrooms and model the best I could and when I could, but also to be there with the staff, alongside staff, as Simon said, to celebrate the gains and steps forward as well.
I can hear you just being so supportive to work with, and you just being on class, you'd gain that respect from teachers because you're doing it alongside them.
Yes.
You're saying, oh, maybe these are the tricky parts around mentor text, and that think aloud. You can't necessarily plan for it completely because kids are going to respond and throw things at you in different ways, and you have being able to kind of co-teach in classrooms. That what a great way to kind of share that practice.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I also liked, Daniel, how you shared the signature practice, that one-page document.
Yep.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the viewers of my newsletter and this
Yeah, definitely.
I love seeing practical things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a technique that's very practical that a lot of the schools in BCE are using. If any pedagogical practices that we have, to kind of name it and make it like a one page or it's a back-to-back, but pretty much you're naming what the practice is, the why for your school and for your context, the impact it's going to have on the students' learning and how it's useful for the teachers. And that comes from the teacher's voice. So obviously there is some professional reading behind that as well.
Because it's informed by research.
It's informed by research, but it also comes through the lens of the teacher's experience with the practice. So it's great in any cycle of improvement or explicit improvement agenda to come towards the end of that cycle, or when teachers have had the opportunity to experience it. But yeah, from that, you're able to also come up with a checklist or of a success criteria for teachers, essentially, about if I'm going to use this practice in my classroom, what would it look like?
What am I look for?
What are my look fors? And then for us as leadership, or anyone coming in to experience that practice firsthand, they can go, oh, what am I actually looking for? What does this practice look like successfully for this school? And that's the other thing as well. Those signature practice documents, they're one pages for your context, for your school. They can be different down the road or in another state or another city. But yeah, that's how we kind of go about it here.
Would you mind sharing that with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mental
one
text.
pager.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Another benefit of those signature practice documents is they get inserted into our whole school curriculum delivery plan. So it's also great for when we have new staff come on board, because sometimes you'll have, like, we did so much work in 2023 in setting those up, but when we have new staff joining 2024, 25, or next year, we need to be able to bring them on the journey with that. And, we're not necessarily able to repeat all the professional learning that occurred over the course of that year, but those signature practice documents become that little first entry point to help orientate the new teacher to how we go about teaching writing at Holy Cross. So it's really handy for them, and then they can then work with Daniel in particular, to, if they're not familiar with that, to build that skill and to work to become familiar and fluent with our practices as well.
What a great resource/reference point for new teachers and teachers if they've taken maternity leave and they've come back.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, so this is what we're focusing
on. Move and change so fast.
They do. Yes.
And Simon, from you, I think it would be useful. I remember a slide where you had kind of your journey outlined. That would be a nice visual for leaders watching who want to
Yeah,
start their writing journey, perhaps. Yeah.
absolutely. We're happy to share that. And because that just gave like a really high level breakdown of how we're mapping out our year. Like our actual full implementation plan is pages and pages long. It goes into a lot of detail so that we as leaders know exactly what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it, who's involved, what's it look like, how we're going to measure for impact. It's got all that detail.
Yeah.
However, having our little one-pager roadmap sort of then gives our staff, our parents, our broader community, they can then follow along and know where we're heading in that cycle and in that journey. So that's something that we've done each year since. So we introduced that in 2023 with our writing journey. But I know, Daniel, this year we're looking at pedagogy and high impact pedagogy this year in particular. And Daniel created the high level overview again that sort of mapped out our year so that once again, we have that clarity.
Amazing. So, yes, school life is very busy, hectic,
Yeah.
complex.
Yes.
Where did you find the time in an already packed schedule to embed this whole school change? And what did you have to stop doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. I
Yeah.
think having the detailed EIA, explicit improvement agenda, our plan, like that was I think, like I said at the conference the other week, that sort of became our true north. That kept us on track so that we didn't veer off into other things, and we would use that regularly to check in with, to monitor our practice and going along. So that kept us on the road there.
And I think the term, like the roadmap, was kind of mapped in terms. So it didn't feel like everything all at once. It was slowly, term one, we're going to do this, then we're going to build on that in term two, and so on. So it didn't feel like everything all at once. So we were still able to fit in our business as usual. And obviously any pedagogical practices that have been across the other KLAs as well, we were trying to keep those continuing from what had occurred before we arrived. But we knew that our narrow focus each term was on the writing. But it isn't easy. But I think by breaking it down, you give yourself an opportunity.
And I think for me as a principal, one of the biggest things that I had to learn as principal and have the courage to do is to be willing and prepared to say no to other good ideas.
Yeah.
Because there is other good things that are happening as a system, because we're a fairly large system. We've got 147 schools in our system. So there is different pockets of work happening all over our system, which is fabulous. And then so you'll be hearing about this school doing these amazing things in numeracy, this school doing these amazing things in grammar, this school doing these amazing things in social emotional well-being. And you go, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. So one of the things for me in particular I had to do was be willing and have the courage to say, no, we're not going to go and do that. This is what we're working on. This is what we have to focus on. I have a little, at the back of my book, I still am a little bit old school. I have a handwritten notepad that I use because I need the handwriting. I love to actually physically handwrite rather than type. Although people who have to read my handwriting might not like it so much. May not be the best actual, the beauty of handwriting. But at the back of my book is like a page where I write down all of the things that I am hearing about, seeing, that I'm thinking this would be great, but not yet. So I don't forget them, but that we stay true to what we're focusing on at the moment, because otherwise our poor staff are just bombarded with too many things. And then we do everything at a surface level, nothing goes deep, and therefore real change never actually happens.
Yeah. Sometimes less is more.
Definitely less is more.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing I had to learn because, I always feel a little bit guilty if I'm not doing everything, because I feel, as an educator, we want to do the very, very best for every student in our care. So we feel like we have to do everything because that's how the kids are going to have the best experience. But actually it's not. We have to be true and honest to what we're focusing on, because we know that's the need at the moment, and we have to stay true to that.
And overloaded, overwhelmed teachers aren't going to
exactly
provide the best education. So I applaud your bravery in saying no to other great potential initiatives, because in turn you said yes to this great focus on mentor text and writing improvement. So
Exactly.
go Holy Cross.
Yeah.
What does the effective use of a mentor text look like at your school, and what makes this approach distinctly the Holy Cross way?
I think the most important thing for us with the mentor text is the authenticity. And like I mentioned earlier, about that teacher's style and the classroom culture kind of coming through those mentor texts. So, you know, they're physically up and visible for our students and for our teachers to use, but they're interacted with. So they're deconstructed, they're revisited. They're not, they might be pretty visually, but they don't have to be. They just have to be authentic, and they have to be used and accessed by the students and the teachers. And I think what makes, I guess, us really distinctive is that our community knows our students really well. So from our leadership to our classroom teachers, not just the students in their care, all the year levels, we seem to have quite a good crossover in that regard to our support staff. So anyone in the room knows that that mentor text is there for a purpose, and they can see how it's used as well by the classroom teacher with the students. So there's that shared understanding of its purpose. And I think that's what makes that distinction for us in our context.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. How does the leadership team monitor the quality of mentor text implementation? You have already mentioned the walkthroughs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was there anything, Daniel, obviously you go into classrooms and
Yes.
Simon, you do too.
Yes. We go into classroom on multiple levels. So both just informally, like as I sort of said, that's that everyday sort of, we walk through, we talk to the kids as they're learning, we're seeing what they're doing, we're seeing what's in the room. It's not as an inspection model. It's for us to be present.
Yeah.
And that is something I think our teachers value that.
Yes,
Like
I
they're
think
not
they value
afraid
it.
of
No.
us walking into their room. Yeah, they don't suddenly stop what they're doing and pivot to something else. They just keep going with their teaching, which is fabulous. And I think that's a sign of trust.
Yeah.
So I think that's a way that we actually have quality assurance, because we know it's not a performance. We know that
We know it's real.
yeah, we know that when teachers are using mentor text, they're not putting it on because the leadership team's coming through, because they have no idea when we might just happen to walk in. Because we will just walk in because we're interested in what they're learning and we're interested in the kids and what they're doing. So I think that's it's sort of an informal way of quality assurance, but I think it is still a form of quality assurance.
Yeah. And I think also at the planning level, I get to see what the teacher's thinking and what they're thinking and going with. And, you know, I might just ask some questions, not to purposely force them to pivot, but just, oh, that's interesting. You know, you've used that text for quite a number of years now. Is there an opportunity to go in a different direction, or maybe go with something that might suit this group in particular who are more interested in this? What do you think? And then they go, oh, that's a good idea, Danny. Do you have anything? And, you know, maybe I do, maybe I don't. And we can look at that together. But I think just asking questions sometimes just to, you know, if you're not asked the question, it's hard for you to think about something different. So that's another way in the planning space.
And I would probably say the other way that we sort of quality assure is actually the students' writing itself. So we do moderation every term, where it's next week, I think, for us, and that's up in here next week. But our teachers will bring down samples of writing. One of the things we did in that 2023 year is we established the process for how we do moderation. We set up our moderation protocols. The staff collectively developed those about how we do moderation, the process for it, how we reference it against, you know, the achievement standard and the success criteria, and then getting our teachers to blind moderate as well. So they would just take somebody else's sample, they would look at it, they would mark it according to the criteria, and then the classroom teacher would then have that conversation, and that professional conversation about the child's writing is really powerful, because sometimes, you know, as teacher, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's okay, it's an app, blah blah blah. But when I actually look at it against the achievement standard, I'm going, yeah, the child delivers that sort of writing all the time, so I think it's an app. But when I'm actually referencing it back to the achievement standard, or the you know, in Queensland through QCAA, we have the standards elaboration. We actually go, oh, actually, that's more than an app. That's actually an above, and this is why it's an above, because I can see X, Y, Z. So I think that moderation is part of our quality assurance, because if we were moderating and we weren't seeing any change in the writing, then that's an issue. But what we have seen is that there has been change. Students have progressed with their writing. They have taken it further. And that's how we know what we're doing is having impact.
Which leads me to the next question. What is the clearest evidence that your mentor text approach has directly impacted your students' learning?
Okay, so there's probably a few things that we can use, because for us here, triangulation is key. We won't rely on one data source to say whether something is working or not. And we also need to allow for time. So, even now, 2025, into our third year of this, would I say that we've got to where we need to be? No, it's still too early to tell. We're going to need another few years to make sure that this is, a solid trajectory of improvement. But some of the things that we're using is one of the things, for example, is just the quality of student writing across multiple sources. So when we're looking at, like I said, our moderation sessions, what are we seeing in the children's writing? Are we actually seeing development? If we've gone, based on writing moderation, actually our kids are having trouble using direct speech in their writing, or if they're having trouble making interesting sentences or using noun groups, and then we have to do a teaching response to that. We can't just ignore that. We actually have to go and do something with it. The next time we moderate, are we seeing an improvement in that? So we have to validate against those data sources, and we have to know, what we're seeing, what's our teaching response to that, and then review and monitor again. So we were seeing lots of students who were getting ATs, who are then pushing into the aboves, or aboves into well aboves, or belows into AT. So we're seeing that trajectory going upwards. Also, we would see one of the tools that we were using in BCE for quite a while was called a writing analysis tool. So we would use that tool. It looks at writing across 8 dimensions. Such as grammar and punctuation, cohesion, those sorts of things. And each year we would have a target. It might be we want 95% of children to get to a level 24, or something like that. What we were seeing is our students were hitting our end of year targets much faster. They were hitting end of year targets. Some of them were hitting them in term 1, but the vast majority were hitting our end of year targets by term 2. So that was a shift. So that told us that things were working and that it was making a difference. And then, of course, for years 3 and 5, NAPLAN writing was an informative source for us. So we have quite the process here where we analyze our NAPLAN data like many schools do. Certainly not something unique to Holy Cross, but we do that deep dive into our data every single year as a whole staff group. It's not just relevant for year 3 and 5 teachers, it's relevant for every teacher. That's right. Every student is our student. It's not the year 3's teacher's student, it's not the year 5 teacher's student. Every student is our student. So we work together to really pull that apart and break it, and once again form teaching responses. But what we were seeing with our NAPLAN data, as Dan said right at the beginning, our students have always been quite capable here at Woodlewin. We would always have some in the top scales, a big chunk in the middle, and then a chunk in the lower end as well. But probably what we were seeing is a lot of our students that were previously scoring, if you look at the new proficiency strands of needs additional support or developing, they were getting pushed up into strong. We had some students from strong being pushed up into exceeding. Currently in 2025, across year 3 and year 5, we do not have one single student in needs additional support or developing in writing across our school. Every child is in strong or exceeding. Our next challenge is to help further to push more of those strongs into exceeding.
Got a lot of strongs.
Yeah, we do. We have more strongs than exceeding, which most schools would have. Exceeding is that higher level. But that's our next challenge, is we want to keep that going to help them go from strong to exceeding, while at the same time making sure students who perhaps writing is a challenge, we're giving them those skills to get into that strong bracket. But like this year when we looked at our NAPLAN results, like that was like a really a happy moment when we realized, oh my God, there was not one child in our school in year 3 and 5 that scored in needs additional support or developing. And it's important to note here that because sometimes when I look at data like that, I'm thinking, oh yes, they're probably in a school where there's no diversity, there's no disability, they're just neurotypical students. Of course, it's easy for them to get great results. our students with disability profile sits at close to 40%. So close to 40% of our students have a verified disability, many of them in that cognitive category. But I think because of the explicitness of our approach to teaching writing and mentor text, providing that what a good one looks like through mentor text, kids can actually see what it is that they're trying to produce as an exemplar. That gives them the skills that they need and also the motivation that they need to actually work hard and to do their very best with writing. Because if you can't picture it, if you can't picture what success looks like, how can you achieve it? So mentor text gives students that picture.
Wow. So much to think about.
Yeah, it is.
So
And,
much.
and NAPLAN is just one data source.
Yeah.
It is not the only data source. We are not pinning our hopes on our NAPLAN data. As I said, we need to triangulate. If we're not seeing growth in all of those areas, then we're not succeeding. But the good thing about NAPLAN is it does give us that opportunity for deep reflection, as a whole staff group. And it also allows us to see how we're going against similar schools as well, because it just gives us that information. Information is helpful.
Yeah. And I appreciate how you've invited teachers into that data analysis and how even though you've exceeded these goals you've set, you've gone, you know what, we're going to go narrow and deeper into this and focus on how do we stretch these kids now, because they're obviously...
And I'm sure while there's nothing that a teacher loves more between 3:30 and 6:30 after school delving into NAPLAN data, in a staff twilight, after they've just spent, 6 hours teaching, credit to our staff, they get fully engaged in it, and they pull it apart, and just the insights that they get, it is truly fascinating, the insights that you can get out of it and things that you think that, no, they've got that's fine. And you're looking at the data again, maybe we need to think again and we need to circle back to this. And we're teaching this in grade 5 and they've missed this concept, which is a year 1 level concept. Okay, we need to go back and revisit that. But, seeing the teachers get immersed in that, even after a long day of teaching, is pretty inspiring too.
And also those pleasant surprises where you may have taught something over and over again. You're like, these kids just aren't getting this. I've got to change my approach. What am I doing? And then the data reflects something different. It's like, well, I have had an impact. What we've been doing is making a difference. So there's also that end of it too, which is really great.
Exactly. That's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
So proud. Such proud parents. I feel like a proud parent. And I just met you last week. Proud auntie.
Yes. We're happy to have you as part of the family.
Yes.
Thank you. What is the next evolution of this work to ensure your sustained long-term success?
I think we keep revisiting all of our pedagogical practices, not all at once, but throughout every year, we like to designate some time to going back into it, whether it's looking over our signature practice documents or getting staff that are existing who have had experience with any of our practices to share their experiences, just so that if we do have staffing changes or, we feel like one of our practices goes astray a little bit or we want to see it more visible in our classrooms, we can lean back on the fact that, well, we've actually done this before, we've worked in this space. So I think for mentor text or for writing, we know that every year we're gonna come back to that at some stage and go over it again. I think it also really helps that we do have writing moderation each term. That really does give writing and mentor text and all the practices around writing a really solid pulse, that it keeps going, because we know that every term we're going to come back and we're going to reflect on how our teaching is going of writing, but also how our students are growing. So that's probably one of the ways that we can look at that in the next evolution.
I think the next step for us as educators also, which we're taking on board next year, is that whole notion of instructional coaching. So as educators, we, like our children, we never finish learning. We never get to a point where we say, yep, this is perfect. I cannot improve my teaching practice any further. That's not teachers. No teacher would say that. Teachers always know that there is something else that they can be doing and as they continue to go from that good to great. And I think that's why they're probably educators in the first place, because they do believe in that lifelong learning. So I think for us next year, we're looking at instructional coaching as a methodology to support our teachers as they hone and refine their practice. Because now, over the last few years, there are a few signature practices that we have here at Holy Cross, particularly around writing, but also just around high impact pedagogical practices that we use across subject areas as well. So now is the great opportunity to look at, okay, well, how can we depth those even further? And how do I know if those practices are taking root in the classroom and what the impact is? So the instructional coach is about the teacher, but it's also not. It's actually about impact. The instructional coaching, the whole purpose of instructional coaching is to see impact for students. So it's always evaluating our practices in terms of what is the impact we're seeing for kids. So I think, it's a very non-threatening way. Once again, it's not about inspection. That's not what we're into. Nobody's got time for inspections. What we're into is meaningful change that leads to positive outcomes for children through great teaching and great learning. So I think that's probably a key, our next step for next year. So I think we're really excited about that. So Daniel's actually going to be trained as an instructional coach early next year. And then we'll also get some other staff trained as instructional coaches during the year. So it's not, all resting on the shoulders of one person. It's a team and collaborative effort.
And I guess the dream is that, the staff, everyone's coaching each other essentially. And, there might be a practice that a particular teacher is so great at modeling or implementing in their classroom. So we can trade, we can peer observe.
And that is one of the best ways that teachers learn, is seeing other teachers teach. Even just the other day, it hit home again. We had some visitors from Kiribati who were also at the Peter conference. If they're watching, hello to our friends in Kiribati. They were coming out here to look at how we were doing writing, and two of our teachers were taking them around, but then also seeing what was going on in classrooms at the same time. And one of our teachers, Sally, came up to me and said, "It is so good seeing other teachers teach. I've just picked up 10 different things that I want to take back to my classroom just from an hour watching a few different teachers." So I think that is a great practice that we can do in schools, watching other teachers teach and allowing teachers to have that time and that professional conversation. So that's something we know we need to do more of here. Being a small school, sometimes it's hard to facilitate that with release time and funds and all that sort of stuff. But we need to do more of that.
We need to find a way, and that's what we're looking to.
We're looking at that next year. How can we be creative around that so teachers can see other teachers and learn from each other? Because the wisdom is not just in the leadership team, far from it. Teachers are the ones teaching every day. They've got the wisdom. We need to learn from them.
Wow, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to Daniel and Simon for sharing such an authentic journey. I'm excited about your instructional coaching journey, as I was one of the first nationally certified instructional coaches in the country, and that's exactly what I help schools do. I help schools to build instructional coaching frameworks that are bespoke to their school. You guys are well on your way. You've got the foundation and the base. But I've worked with St. Mary's in Mackay and about to work with St. Joseph's on their journey, but I've worked with many schools in New South Wales to develop their own playbooks and instructional coaching frameworks. So when you said all of that, I was very happy to hear, because you have the best foundation to be able to do this successfully. So I'm very excited.
Thank you very much.
And always here if you want to just bounce ideas.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
It was it was really great to make that connection with you, Stephanie, and I think that's one of the benefits of going to conferences like the Peter Conference. And even though while we're only there on the second day, because the busyness of school didn't enable us to be there for 2 days, the fact that we got to meet you and to connect with you, and thank you for coming over to us and talking to us, because we may not have been brave enough to come over to you and to pick your brain. So I'm really glad that you took that initiative. But I think in education, you've got to make those networks and connections. We've got to leverage off each other.
There's so much knowledge out there.
Exactly.
We get it from each other.
And we're not in competition with one another. We are, in partnership with one another. And I think that, that to me, that's what education's about.
Yes. And I just want to share some of the key takeaways I've kind of gleaned from your story. We all have this shared goal of writing improvement. We want to see these things and coming back to starting with what is actually happening with your students, looking at the work
Yeah.
samples. If you don't know where to start there.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you guys shared. The
Yeah,
fact that
definitely.
you, as leaders, positioned yourself as partners in learning with the teachers,
Mm.
the fact that you're present, you're visible in classrooms,
Mhm.
that really shone in your story. I'm taking away that you can have this vision, this goal, and you can develop your own roadmap. Every school's journey can be different. You don't have to necessarily do the Holy Cross way. You develop your own journey that's
Yep.
authentic to you. But you know, there's so many ways to kind of get to this end goal or vision. But you do need quality professional learning. Um, and creating that community of writers sounds just so powerful because the way that your language came through around teachers actually understanding what success looks like. The fact that you said teachers, you yourself are authors and writers, and the students are authors and writers. You know, how powerful is that?
Yeah.
Teachers being supported by Daniel in their classroom through co-teaching and mentoring and coaching, them seeing the impact on their students, the joy their students are feeling when they're writing, and then checking for impact constantly and making tweaks. I want to thank you for sharing such an inspiring journey. I've learned so much, and I'm sure schools watching are going to have a million things to take away for their.
I hope
Oh,
so.
great.
It was a great pleasure to be able to share our story. We're a humble little school in Brisbane, but having this opportunity, because this is not about Daniel and I or the leadership team, this is about celebrating our students and celebrating our amazing staff.
And we're really proud of what we've achieved and
Yeah.
what the staff have done and the students have done over the last few years.
You should be.
No, so thank you for giving us that opportunity.
Thank you so much, guys.